Good afternoon, guys. This is the second lecture for Chapter 10, Plants Without Seeds. You will need your Chapter 10 classwork packet. Now, this is for my 7th graders in periods 2, 6, and 7. If you're in 8th grade, please close the video and go to Chapter 6.2. For this packet, you will need to go to this page. Going to be after this one. Now the key terms, chapter 10.2 and 10.3, I put them all on one paper because it wasn't much. So if you do this page for key terms, again, put a picture here, put a drawing, 4 colors, look up definition in the back of the book, and you will cover chapter 10.2 and 10.3. For today's Cornell Notes, go to the page that says chapter 10.2, Plants Without Seeds. Again, before I forget, don't put a page number on the bottom. We'll put the page number when we come back, and we put this in our S&B. Now, for the EQ, please go right here on the title card. You will have to download this PowerPoint off my website, and it's going to be this one. What characteristics do the 3 groups of non-vascular plants share? This will be a short video because there's not that many slides, okay? So let's get to it. First slide. Seedless vascular plants. There's 2 key words you have to pay attention to. Number 1, vascular plants. We need to remember that if we go back in our slideshow, vascular plants are plants that have this, vascular tissue. Vascular tissue is plant tissue that contains these kind of tubes. They're called phloem and xylem. Phloem transports food. So any food made by the leaves when they turn sunlight and water into sugar, you don't want the food to get stuck here. You want the food to travel to different parts of the plants, especially the parts down here away from the leaves. So the food travels through the phloem. Now the xylem is what transports water. So any water collected from the roots will not be able to travel to the top and keep this part of the plant hydrated. So if plants have xylem and phloem, they're called vascular plants because that's vascular tissue. Not all plants have that. And one of the characteristics we learned about vascular plants is that because they can have water travel up to the top and food travel to the bottom, it allows plants to grow very, very tall. Also, they don't have to be surrounded by water. In fact, the water could be collected on the bottom where the roots are at, so they're adapted for land. So most, not all, but most plants that live on land are vascular. Okay, non-vascular, we learned that, you can have plants that live on land, but they have to be very close to water. So now when we go to this chapter right here, chapter 10.2, these are vascular plants that, despite the fact that they're vascular and they're evolved, they still don't know how to make seeds. And there's 3 major groups. There's ferns, which you probably have in your house right now, club mosses, and horsetails. They have vascular tissue but don't produce seeds. Instead, they release spores. And we have to reference this note from last time. Remember the life cycle that we mentioned last time? That this is for plants that don't make seeds. They have 2 stages of their life. It's called the sporophyte stage, where they make spores. And they have the gametophyte, where they make gametes, which could be eggs or sperm cells. And they produce a zygote, and that will grow to be a new plant, and the cycle keeps going. And I mentioned that these spores, they're not seeds. They have to land on wet ground. If the ground is dry, the spores dry up. So you'll never find this kind of plant in the desert. You can find it in hot climates, and they won't be around. But when the climate gets cold or wet, they'll grow. But when maybe you have a dry summer, you won't find them because without that wet dirt, spores won't take to make the gametophyte. So that is 3 major categories. Let's go to the first one, mosses. A moss gametophyte is low growing. So right here, let me click on it. This is the gametophyte. Now, this is one stage of the plant. Now, the sporophyte stage actually grows like a stalk. So you don't necessarily have to have the gametophyte and then the sporophyte. You can have both at the same time. But obviously, the gametophyte comes first. The sporophyte will be like the stalk with the capsule that has the spores. Sorry, just had a brain fart. And eventually this stalk could come off and you just have this plant. So sporophyte will come and go when it's time to reproduce. Now these are not leaves or stems. It's a leaf-like structure and stem-like structure. In fact, these are not even roots. They're called rhizoids. You can think of this as a primitive plant. Before plants evolved to what they are now, this is what they were probably like. So modern plants have more complicated, complex stems and leaves and better roots. This rhizoid, think of it as a very weak root. mosses can be easily pulled from the ground. So this doesn't anchor it as well as modern day roots. The next one is ferns, and I mentioned you probably have this growing inside your house. Ferns are also vascular plants that don't make seeds. Now, the thing about these is that they don't really reproduce with sporophytes. They actually grow their stems right here parallel to the ground. If you notice, the stems go this way. In a tree, the stems might go up above the ground or sideways, but here the stem goes along the ground. Now, I drew a picture right here, see, almost as good as that one, to kind of show you what happens if you have this in your backyard. This will cover your entire yard unless you stop it, because what's going to happen is this stem will continue to grow out this way, and it'll keep going and going and going until it hits a brick wall or it hits a barrier. So if you have any of these ferns growing in your yard, what you have to do is maybe put a barrier like right here and cut this one. Otherwise, this will keep growing, and before you know it, your entire yard will be covered in just one massive fern. You don't have that problem if you have this inside your house, because it's most likely inside a container, maybe like a pot. Maybe you have it like in a hanging basket. So because you have this in your house in a basket, you're preventing the stems from extending. So the plant won't overgrow itself. It'll just stay in the container. Maybe the frond might grow a little bit bigger. You might get another layer, and you might get more leaves growing out. But you're certainly not going to have it just like where the plant is spilling itself out and overgrowing. So that's how basically this plant, even though it can make spores, it prefers to just expand, grow the stem, and spread out through the forest or your backyard or wherever you're growing it. Okay, so ferns are the second group of vascular seedless plants. And the third one, oh, it's not here, horsetail. I thought it was here. Maybe you guys seen horsetails. They kind of look like this. Like that. In Norco, there's a lot of rivers, and you could find this in swamps. I've actually seen this a lot in Irvine. So horsetail is a plant that looks like that. That's the third group. You could always Google it and get a better picture of that. But that's pretty much it. It's, like I said, it's a very short Cornell note. In fact, for the Cornell notes, I wrote here minimum 2 items. Normally it says, you look right here, it says 3 items. Okay, I put for this one 2 items because there's not that much information. In fact, I had to fill it up with a meme right here. So if you could just put 2 items right here, you're good. And put your summary, and you are done. I will upload chapter 10.3 by Friday. Okay, until then, take care, stay inside, self-quarantine, try to avoid crowds more than 10, and just enjoy being indoors. Okay, bye.